Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have Pre-Calc Lesson 29. It's the unit circle. It's a huge deal. It's awesome. We're going to get so many things from it. And we're going to talk about very large and very small fractions and quadrantal angles. Okay, let's first talk about very large and small fractions. Okay. So if the denominator is fixed, the value is determined by the numerator. Okay, so that is looks like this, right? The value of x over any number approaches 0 as x approaches 0, right? So as x gets closer and closer to 0, it's 2, 1, 1/2, right? This fraction gets closer and closer to 0. Okay? Now, that is also true that the value of any number over x approaches 0 as x goes to infinity, right? X in all these cases is positive. As x gets really, really, really big, then this fraction gets really, really, really small, right? In here, if x gets really big, this fraction gets really big. Okay. Now, this is going to be important more a little later. We're going to talk about really big and really small fractions. I'll give you a couple examples. Right, like if we did 4 over 0.0008, right, this number on bottom is approaching 0, so this is going to be a big fraction. It's going to give me 500. Right, versus if I had 4 over 0.00008, right, this is approaching 0 faster at 500,000. Okay, just examples of large and small fractions. All right, now let's get into the big topic of today, the unit circle. It's called the unit circle because the radius is 1. Okay. Now, in all of these points, the key to remember, our x is our cosine and our y is our sine. I'll show you what that means. So we have these points here. They are called our quadrantal angles. Okay? Quadrantal angles are angles that are multiples of 90 degrees. Okay? So this is 0 or 360. This is 90. This is 180. This is 270. Those are our quadrantal angles. Okay? And we've talked about these when we've talked about converting from polar to rectangular, right? It's how we use it as kind of a road map. Okay? Now, it's the unit circle, so it has these points here. This first point here is 1, 0. This point here is 0, 1. This is -1, 0. And this is 0, -1. You will have to memorize the whole unit circle. We will have quizzes on just the unit circle. I'll give you a copy, but you do need to know it. Now, here what this means is x is our cosine, y is our sine. So if I was to take the cosine of 0 degrees, it gives me 1, which is my x value. And the sine of 0 degrees gives me 0, which is my y value. Likewise, let's look at if I did 90. the cosine of 90 degrees gives me 0. It's my x value. And the sine of 90 degrees gives me 1, which is my x value. Now, the other parts of the unit circle, okay, we have 3 different segments in each quadrant, here, here, and here. And they relate to degrees. This first one here is 30 degrees. This second one is 45 degrees. And this third one is 60 degrees. Now, the really cool thing about these is they all relate to our 30, 60, 90 triangles and our 45, 45, 90 triangles. So this first point, I want the x value. The x value is going to be the cosine of 30, which I know the cosine of 30 is root 3 over 2. So my x coordinate is root 3 over 2. And the sine of 30 gives me my y value, which is 1/2. So I have my y value as 1/2. Now, if I go up to 60 degrees, the cosine of 60 degrees is 1/2. It's the opposite of the sine. They flip-flop places. Likewise, the sine of 60 degrees is root 3 over 2. They just swap. Now, for our 45 degrees, the cosine of 45 degrees is the same as the sine of 45 degrees, which is 1 over root 2, but we always will write it as root 2 over 2, so we don't have any radicals in our denominator. Now, in each of our quadrants, like I said, there are these 3 points. And you will have to memorize each of the coordinates for each of these 3 points. But it's very simple because the numbers are all the same. The only thing that changes is the sign. So let's look at this point up here. It's going to have the same values as this point here, 1/2 and root 3 over 2, but our x value is negative because in the second quadrant, cosine is negative. So each of these points, this point here is going to be negative root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2, because cosine is negative. And this point here will be negative root 3 over 2, 1/2. Now in the third quadrant, both x and y are negative because both cosine and sine are negative. But the points are still in the same order, except I wrote these backwards. This should be negative 1/2, negative root 3 over 2. Because this little acute angle here is 30 degrees. This little acute angle is 45, and this is 60. Now, from 0, it's much further, but the acute angle is smaller, right? And I can draw these. If I was to draw a right triangle here, I have a 30. This degree here would be 60, 90. And it would show me my x value. Now, in the fourth quadrant, okay, this will be 1/2 negative root 3 over 2, root 2 over 2 negative root 2 over 2, and root 3 over 2 negative 1 over 2. The positives and negatives correspond to sine and cosine. They also correspond to x and y. X is positive on this half of the graph. Y is negative on this half of the graph, right? That shows in all of my points. Okay. Now, let's do a couple examples using our unit circle, right? So we want to evaluate the 3 tangent of 180. So if I look at my unit circle, 180 is over here. So the point is negative 1, 0. Now I know, and you do too, that tangent is sine over cosine. So if we look at our point, the sine of 180 is 0, the cosine of 180 is -1. So I will have 3 times 0 over -1, which is 3 times 0, which is 0. Let's look at for sine of 270. Okay, 270 is here. Sine is the y value. My y value is -1. So this is 4 times -1, which is -4. The sine of 270 is -1. How about 3 tangent of 270? Again, that's saying 3 sine of 270 over cosine of 270, which is 3 times, if we look at 270, the sine of 270 is -1, the cosine is 0, so I have -1 divided by 0, and we know we can't divide by 0, everything blows up, so we say it is undefined. Okay, what if we had this? Sine of 1 -35 plus 3 root 2 cosine of 180. Okay, there's a lot of different points in this. Let's first look at the sine of -135. Okay, -135 on my unit circle brings me all the way over here to this point right here. Okay, so the sine of -135, our related angle is 45, and we know that this puts me, right, -135 is over here. This puts me in the third quadrant, and sine is negative in the third quadrant. And the sine of 45 is root 2 over 2. Now, let's look at 180. This is 180 here. The cosine of 180 is the x value, which is -1. So, coming all the way down here, I get sine of -135 is negative root 2 over 2 plus 3 root 2 times the cosine of 180 is -1. So, I get negative root 2 over 2 minus 3 root 2. I'm going to multiply this fraction by 2 over 2. So I have negative root 2 over 2 minus 6 root 2 over 2, which gives me -7 root 2 over 2. Okay? Now, like I said, you will need to memorize the unit circle. We will have quizzes where you will have to fill in all of these points on the unit circle, so be prepared for that. But for now, we'll end our notes so you can take time to go home and memorize the unit circle. That is all for today.